Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri. So many youngsters come and they ask for how can we prepare for CSS exam. I have worked with many, about a dozen, and all of them were able to make it, not because of what I told them, but somehow it's the planning what works. So let me share it with you. The very first question you should be clear about as aspiring candidate is why do you want to do it? We all know that our bureaucracies are almost a total failure. So ask yourself, why do you want to do it, and what role really you feel you look up as a great role and you want to uh, be there. What's your passion? If you're not clear about it, think about it. Take your time to explore yourself. You can't tell a lie to yourself. This is very important. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense aspiring to become part of a system which is retarded and retarding somehow. In last 70 years we couldn't reform it that much, because that is a big risk. Personally, you get stuck into a system and it's not giving you enough what you were looking for, and that's a big risk. The issue is that we were colonized by the English, they left, and later we were colonized by another system which was run through this retarded bureaucracy. They never worked for public. Let's acknowledge it. Our countries, developing countries, are paying cost of not doing anything. Right? They don't take decisions. It's not that they're making wrong decision. If some system is making wrong decision, eventually it will learn and start making better decisions. But the learning is not taking place. So that's very important. I want to be a CSS officer or a public servant is one thing. That's a means, that's authority, that's service delivery, that resources that you want to have in your hands and in your pen, or the legal powers. These are means. What end you want to achieve? If you are not clear about this issue, you are treading into a danger zone. Poor salaries, doesn't want to change, resists, and just unproductive system. How do you see it? What will you do there? Ask yourself this question and prepare yourself. How will you do that? In that respect, two fundamental questions are what problem you see you in the society, in the ecosystem you want to solve, and what you really can do better than others. What is your personality? What's your attitude? It's like sailing against the wind. If you really want to change, and you have to be non-conformist to that level, and at the same time very tactful, skillful, knowledgeable, uh, maintaining your reputation. The competencies is actually the sum of these attitudes and skills and knowledge. So do your capability gap analysis. That's very important in the beginning. Now let's come to that we have decided, yeah, I have to do it. A little bit of statistics is very important. Almost 10,000 candidates appear. About 1,000 clear the written exam, and every year there are about 100 positions vacant. Sometimes there are new departments opening up, or new provinces, districts opening up. To it can exceed, it can be 150, sometimes 175, but normally the replenishment is only 80 to 100 seats, so you can say 100 seats. So if out of 10,000 appearing, hundreds are being selected, the ratio you can easily see, it's 100 to 1. 100 appear, 1 gets through. And you must know that majority is with science subject background, because eventually it's a number game. That's how it looks on the face of it. But reality is a bit different, and it's a bit positive. That is, how many of them were really serious to do that? I have done a bit of, because I have been part of the system and I saw people doing and falling and winning and all that. The rest who couldn't just took it casually. They hadn't put their head and hearts together to do it. The people who had put their head and heart together, they are only 1,000 in every year. Only they planned well. It's an issue of planning. I haven't seen any failure which was not understood or which could be attributed to anything else than planning or a capacity issue. No, it was a planning failure. So by that ratio, you can see the real people who were serious were 1,000. If you were serious, the ratio is 10 to 1. And one thing you must know that majority comes from a few years of experience. They started another job, they were doing some lecture, they were working somewhere. So they were doing some job. So they managed really well out of that job, out of a married life. They did this. I also did while I was doing a job and I was married as well. So it's doable, totally doable, but it needs a very serious focus and planning. So we would look at what capabilities are really required to do this uh, competition exam. But let's first look at the structure, what they expect us to know. There are mandatory subjects, which is English, English essay, and general knowledge. The part of general knowledge is Pakistan affair, current affairs, Islamiyat, everyday science. And then there are optional subjects. Optional subjects have quite a number of buckets. You can find few subjects of your choice, but almost nobody can find all subjects of his previous, which he or she has already read. So you have to learn quite a few new subjects and one or two subjects you can find from me. So you have to take one of those baskets to make the complete number. So that's what it is. But let's see what goes into it. Now let's look at each of them. English is about vocabulary. They're not asking for a very verbose, ostentatious English. They're asking for a simple, error-free, plain but good expression with appropriate adjectives. So a vocabulary is required. For essay, it's again vocabulary and ability to write an essay. Essay is about organizing our thoughts, and essay is not just a plethora of information put together. It's a format in which the information has to be logically arranged and presented. So essay writing is the core. You will see that Pakistan affairs, you have the information, you know the chronology, but it's about how you put forth your argument in the form of a few paragraphs in an essay. Current affairs, again, sort of 5 essays you write there. Islamiyat is again essay. And many of your subjects on the optional sides, for example, I had geography, and the part of population geography was again the same information was to be logically presented as an essay. So the capabilities now required is your good vocabulary, your expression, and your essay writing skills. These are the core. And one more thing is obviously reading, because reading is for the sake of comprehension. You will go through a lot of books on all these areas, but how to read a book for understanding is something which most of our school systems actually don't teach. We don't read for understanding. Most of the time we are into a rote sort of thing. So that's very important. If you can somehow get hold of this book, How to Read a Book by Adler, Mortimer Adler. This is a classic in this area, but we will discuss some of these things, the techniques they tell about. A little bit on the resources. Uh, One big lesson is always ask about the relevant material from the people who have gone through this process for both mandatory and optional subjects. That's very important. Otherwise, there are thousands of books out there and they might not be relevant, and you will be wasting your time. The focus is very important. If the same course is put into a college or university, it would take 4 or 5 years to complete, really, if we compare it with the current day bachelor's and all that. So you don't have that luxury of time. Nobody had that luxury of time because time is running out. and you see your own peers, friends, they are getting hooked up into different organizations. And while you are doing it, you have to do it at a fast pace, at a hectic pace, in a period of 10 to 14 months. So in Pakistan, for example, Pakistan Affairs, Struggle for Pakistan by I.H. Qureshi, and Making of Pakistan by K.K. Aziz are the two good books which must be read for understanding. We will discuss how. For Islamiyat, Islami Nazriya Hayat, and it is almost, it covers 90%, but few topics you have to search around. And another book I have put on the screen. For everyday science, it's actually the general science of metric level. You take any board's book, and or maybe any Oxford or Cambridge book, general science book, which the O level people study, and that's what it is. One big mistake many of candidates have been found doing is reading newspaper, uh, thinking it will soup up their general knowledge. Newspaper is not for understanding. Newspaper is only for information. For understanding, you have to go to books. So for general knowledge, current affairs, get the Gerald Siegel, this Prisoner of Geography, Dr. Safdar Mahmood's books on international affairs or Pakistan affairs out there. Read at least one book on international affairs, one on Pakistan affairs, so that you have a background knowledge of where these issues in the society that we are facing today, the poverty, the revenue issues, the fiscal deficit issues, or the education quality issues, or Kashmir affairs. What's the background? Once you know the background and the story of the things, then newspaper would be of a little bit help, and that too only in the last 3 months, to update yourself to what happened recently. Since vocabulary is the main failure point for many of the students coming from Urdu medium or rural areas, so vocabulary has many dimensions. One important part is knowing the stem of the root words. That helps you a lot, because if I know, for example, photography, I know photo. From the photo, I know it's a photon and it's a photoelectric. So the words have some roots, and if we know 200 roots, we actually know 2000 words. So Martin and Norman Lewis book World Power Made Easy is a good source. And vocabulary comes with associations. So these gradients, for angry, I have many words, and I have words for feelings. Look the Plachnik circle on the Google Images, etc. So make a notebook on vocabulary, but go through this book. The minimum is go through this book. If you, it will give you an understanding how to play with words. A very important lesson about vocabulary is that vocabulary has lots of buckets. It's the bucket of science and technology, of business and economics, and literature, philosophy, and sociology. You have to have uh, each bucket at least quite reasonably filled. If you are only a science and technology student and you're very poor on business and economics and these kind of vocabulary, your vocabulary will remain poor. So that's very important, to know a little bit on all of these things and have something in all of these buckets, so that overall your vocabulary can express a variety of things when you want to write your essays. And as believers, this is very important principle. If we do only hard work and we don't pray, then we are suffering from hubris, takabbur. If we are only praying and not doing hard work, then we are idiot. You have to pray, and you have to plan well and hard work, and then leave the result to the forces which are not your own hand. That is the creator. He connects the dot, and he could, and ask for it. Ask and you will be given, at the rule is. Thank you. A few more things are that when you will make your calendar on a Gantt chart or on a simple this sort of lines from month zero to how it goes, we all know that almost every book we have to go through 3 times to absorb it and to really get meaning out of it. an inspectional reading followed by an analytical reading, and then the final round. So for each 100 marks, roughly you have to go through one book of 400, 500 pages, right? So imagine if there are 1100 marks, you have to go through 11 books. So if you take one book in a month, that means 11 months. And that doesn't mean that you have 1 month for a book. You have to take 3 rounds. So schedule is so tight, so you don't have that luxury to just waste time. So it has to be very, very focused. That's why you don't have even time to read unnecessary things, and wasting time on newspaper every day for 2 hours in the prime time is the sheer idiot thing to do. So unfortunately, the school system have not taught us anything how can we can self-educate ourselves, how to self-organize our time. This is now the time, if you can do it, that you have to self-transform yourself, self-educate yourself. You have to self-manage your time, right? And the resources that are available with you is the time, the spare time. Those are precious moments. I told you the people were doing jobs and they did it. So whether you get up early in the morning or you make it afternoon and late at night, but keeping your health and the sleep balance, that motivation and inspiration is always internal. Do not share it to many of your friends that you are doing this. When you will do it, and everybody will know, come to know. So it's always good to keep things yourself, rather focus on studies instead of just disseminating and broadcasting, oh, I am doing this. That's a bad approach. An important point about optional subject is take your time in selecting your subject. This is a big planning failure many candidates make, that they hurry up in selecting subjects, and then the next time they change it, and the next time they again change it. The best way to select subject is take last 10 years paper. Those papers are printed, available in the market. Look at those papers carefully and ask yourself, do you feel like going with that subject? You will always have one or two new subjects, and some subjects you can select from your background of schooling, college, which you opted. So last 10 years paper is the good way to select, but don't go and buy the books yourself just from the market, anything. No, go to some CSS pass candidate. You can contact me as well, uh, and get in touch with somebody who has opted for that subject and did it successfully with that subject. For example, if you're going for geography, someone who opted for the subject geography and CSS and did with it, better ask for them what is the relevant book for you. So that's very important. So that's almost overall how it looks like. Start with your mandatory subjects. In this process, your vocabulary will also build up. We will discuss especially on how to build vocabulary and how to structure your essay and paragraph. And very important is how to read a book for understanding. Do not waste your time reading newspaper. Newspaper is not for understanding, it is for information. How to read and how to benefit from a newspaper for your essays, for your information material in the last 3-4 months, that we will discuss. Thank you very much. Good luck.